The ring had been her husband's grandmother's before it was hers, a band of dark iron set with a chip of amber the color of late afternoon sun. Dara Iron Hollow had worn it for 11 years. She had taken it off exactly once, the morning she washed the body of the man she had loved, and she had put it back on before the sun went down because she could not bear the weight of her own bare hand. She took it off for the last time on a Tuesday in late October, in the back room of Callow Ridge's only market stall that dealt in second-hand metal, and she did not look at it again after she set it on the counter. The coin she walked away with was enough to pay half of healer Bren's fee. She stood outside the healer's door looking at the coin in her palm, doing the arithmetic she already knew the answer to. Her mother had been sick since the first cold snap, a deep rattling in the chest, a fever that came and went like an unwelcome guest. Dara knew the remedies. She had learned them at her mother's knee, the way other children learned songs: feverfew steeped long, willow bark measured by weight not volume, the hill herb her people called goat's breath that grew only above the frost line and opened the lungs like a window thrown wide. She had the knowledge. What she did not have was the coin. She knocked anyway. Bren listened and was sorry and had a family of his own to keep. He closed the door without slamming it, which she supposed was its own kind of courtesy. The walk back through the market took her along the upper road, past the edge of town where the hill rose and the houses thinned to gardens. She was not thinking about much. Grief has a way of emptying the mind to a useful blankness, and she almost walked past the fence before she saw it. The garden on the other side was the most ordered thing she had seen in months. Row on row, every plant staked and labeled, the beds edged with smooth river stone. There were herbs she had not seen growing in a lowland garden since she was a girl: silverleaf, thorn clover, the flat dusty green rosettes of stone sage her mother used for joint pain. And there, in the far corner, unmistakable even in the thin late light, the feathery gray-green of goat's breath. Dara stopped walking. She stood at the fence for what might have been 2 minutes or 10, and she did not notice the man who had come around the side of the house and was watching her with a watering can still in his hand until he spoke. "You know what that one is," he said. It was not a question. He was an older man, tall, worn thin by years of outdoor work, with a gray beard and the unhurried eyes of someone who spent most of his time paying attention to small things. He was watching her the way she had been watching the garden, not with suspicion, but with a kind of focused interest. "Goat's breath," she said. "My people call it that. I don't know your name for it." "We don't have one," the man said. "I grew that from a seed I traded for at the Highland Market 6 years ago, and I still don't know everything it does." He set the watering can on the fence post. "What does your mother use it for?" Dara blinked. "I didn't say my mother." "No," he said. "But you have the look of a person who has just had a door closed in her face, and you're standing at my fence staring at a medicinal herb as though it owes you something. I've had that look myself." He held out his hand across the fence rail, plain and unhurried. "Emmett Gorse. This is my garden." She shook his hand. Dara Iron Hollow. What does she have? It came out of her before she could think about whether to let it: the fever, the rattling chest, the remedies she knew by heart and the herbs she could not afford to buy. Emmett listened the way very few people listen, without assembling his response while she was still speaking, without the small impatient shift of weight that meant a person was waiting for their turn. When she was done he nodded once, slowly, as if she had confirmed something he had suspected. "How far?" he said. 2 hours. The South Ridge Path. He looked at the sky, the flat pewter of a late autumn afternoon, an hour of light left at most. Then he looked back at her. "Wait here," he said. He was back in 4 minutes with a canvas pack over one shoulder, his coat buttoned to the throat, and a flat wooden apothecary's kit under his arm. He had cut a good-sized bunch of the goat's breath, wrapped in damp cloth. "You don't have to," she started. 2 hours there, 2 back, he said, opening the garden gate. "We should move." She did not argue. There was something in his manner, not brusqueness, but a settled purposefulness, that made argument feel beside the point. He had decided to help, and no amount of courtesy from her would unmake it. She found, to her own surprise, that she was glad. They walked south as the light failed. He asked her questions about her mother's symptoms in the careful way of someone who actually needed the answers. She told him about the goat's breath, that steeped long and taken warm it opened the airways without raising the heart rate, that the dose had to be precise. He pulled out a small notebook and wrote things down by the last of the daylight, not because he doubted her, but because he was the kind of man who wrote things down. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked. "My mother," she said. "She learned it from hers. Her people have been healers in the hill country for 3 generations. And you?" "I married into the lowlands. I thought I was leaving all of it behind." She paused. "I thought wrong." He did not press. They walked the rest of the way in the comfortable silence of 2 people who have said enough for now. Her mother, Eula Iron Hollow, was 73 years old, built like a river boulder, and had strong opinions about being found in bed by strangers. When Dara pushed open the cabin door and lit the lamp, she could see Eula was sicker than she had let on. The rattle in her chest filled the small room, the fever bright across her gray-green cheekbones. Eula looked at Emmett with the direct assessment of a woman who has outlived most of the people who ever underestimated her. "Who's this?" she said. Not a question. A categorization. "Emmett Gorse," Dara said. "He's an apothecary. He brought the goat's breath." Eula considered this. "Does he know what he's doing?" "Somewhat," Emmett said, setting his kid on the table without offense. "Less than your daughter. I brought the herb, she'll brew it. I'll stay and watch." Eula looked at her daughter. Dara, who had not been paid a compliment she entirely believed in a long time, felt something loosen in her chest. "Sit down, then," Eula said to Emmett. "You've walked a long way." The remedy took an hour, the goat's breath steeped at a low heat, willow bark added in the last quarter hour, a half spoon of stone honey to make it bearable. Dara worked at the hearth while Emmett sat across from Eula. By the time the remedy was ready, Eula had extracted his full history, widowed 9 years, the herb farm inherited from his wife's family, no children, a reputation in 3 villages for growing things nobody else could grow, and had given him, in return, approximately nothing about herself, which Dara recognized as her mother being impressed. Eula drank the remedy in 3 deliberate swallows and said it tasted like a field in September. "That's the stone sage undertone," Emmett said. "I know what it is," Eula said. "I grew it for 30 years. I'm paying you a compliment." He slept on the floor that night on a bedroll he had thought to pack, because the South Ridge path in the dark in late autumn was no one's idea of good judgment. Dara sat up by the fire listening to her mother's breathing slow and deepen, the rattle softening hour by hour as the remedy worked into the fever. She woke in the chair before dawn to find Emmett had rebuilt the fire and was at the table with his notebook open, writing down everything she had told him while it was still clear in his mind. Her mother was asleep. Her breathing was easier than it had been in weeks. Dara sat across from him and said, quietly, "You should let me pay you." "For what?" he said, without looking up. "The herbs. Your time. The night on the floor." He looked up then. His eyes, she noticed for the first time in proper morning light, were the same amber color as the chip of stone in the ring she had sold. He had the look of a man about to say something careful. "Tell me what mountain sweet is used for," he said, tapping his notebook. "I've had it growing for 4 years and used it for headache and nothing else, and I suspect I'm missing something." She told him. And then she told him about its cousin, the low-growing variety, and why the 2 had different actions despite looking nearly identical. He wrote it all down, asking careful questions, and somewhere in the explanation about root versus leaf preparation she stopped thinking about the coin she did not have and thought instead about the fact that she had not talked about her mother's herbs with anyone in 4 years, and how she had forgotten what it felt like to be listened to by someone who wanted to know. She stayed through the week. And then through the next. Her mother rallied the way old tough things rally, not in a rush, but with a stubborn, methodical progress. By the second week she was sitting up. By the third she was at the table, and she and Emmett had begun a low-grade disagreement about the proper storage of dried stone honey that showed every sign of lasting the rest of the season. Dara walked the 2 hours to Emmett's farm every few days to tend his garden while he was at her mother's cabin. He had not asked her to. She had looked at the 300 plants, the careful labels, the beds that needed winterizing before the hard frost, and had simply started doing it, because she could not bear to watch something tended with that much patience die of neglect. He found her one afternoon in mid-November, kneeling in the goat's breath bed, mulching the roots for winter. "You know what you're doing," he said, the same thing he had said at the fence, with the same quality of noticing rather than complimenting. "I grew up with this," she said. "You learn to tend the things you need." He stood in the cold afternoon light for a moment. "Then, there is a room at the back of the house. It was my wife's workroom. I haven't known what to do with it. It has a window that faces east." Dara looked up at him. "Your mother is going to need the lower altitude through the winter," he said. "The ridge cold is hard on lungs that have been sick." "I know. There's room in the house," he said. "For both of you. If you wanted." She did not say yes immediately, and he did not seem to need her to. He went to put the kettle on, and she finished mulching the goat's breath, and by the time she came inside he had made enough tea for 3 cups, and she noticed the 3rd cup was already set at the table as if it had always been there. By the first hard snow, Eula Iron Hollow had moved her 3 boxes of belongings into the front room of Emmett Gorse's hill farm and begun a comprehensive reorganization of his pantry, which she considered long overdue. Emmett seemed to find this more settling than alarming. Dara moved into the east-facing room, and in the evenings she and Emmett sat at the wide kitchen table and worked through his catalogue of herbs, she talking, he writing, building something that neither of them had had a name for when they began but that had started to feel, in the long lamplit hours with her mother's voice coming from the front room, a great deal like home. She did not have the ring anymore. She thought about it sometimes, not with the sharp grief she had expected but with something quieter, a kind of gratitude toward the object that had been worth exactly what she had needed it to be worth, at exactly the right moment. Her husband had been a good man. She thought he would have understood. In the spring, when the goat's breath put out its first new growth and the catalogue had grown to 2 bound volumes, a trader passing through Callow Ridge stopped at the farm to ask about buying herbs. He had heard there was an herbalist on the hill who knew the old orc remedies. Emmett sent him to Dara. She was in the east room, writing up a remedy in the careful notation she had developed over the winter, her knowledge, his system, something that belonged to both of them now. She heard Emmett's voice, and then the trader's, and then Emmett saying simply, "She'll see you." She set down her pen and went to the door, and through the kitchen window she could see the spring garden coming back to life, and her mother in the yard in her heavy coat inspecting the stone honey bed with the focused disapproval of a woman who has strong feelings about mulching depth, and Emmett in the doorway watching Dara the way he watched his garden, with patience, and with a quiet pleasure in things that had found their right place in the world. She had arrived at his fence with nothing left to sell. She had not expected to find, on the other side of it, everything she had not known she was still looking for.